Joe Miller was having a normal Tuesday. He woke up at 7:30, fed his goldfish named Bubbles, and made his usual breakfast of toast and scrambled eggs. The Florida sun streamed through his kitchen window as he sipped his coffee. Joe worked as a marine biologist at the local research center studying coral reefs and their changing patterns. At 32 years old, his life was steady and predictable. That was until his phone rang. "Hello, is this Joe Miller?" asked a stern voice. "Yeah, that's me," Joe answered, balancing his phone between his ear and shoulder as he rinsed his coffee mug. "This is Director Susan Bell from NASA headquarters. Congratulations, Mr. Miller, you've been selected." Joe almost dropped his mug. 3 months ago, he had entered a contest through NASA's public outreach program. The prize was supposed to be a tour of the Kennedy Space Center and lunch with an astronaut. He had completely forgotten about it. "Wow, that's great. When's the tour?" Joe asked, already mentally checking his work calendar. There was a pause on the line. "Tour? Mr. Miller, you've been selected as Earth's delegate to the Galactic Concord's Centennial Gathering on Harmonious Prime. You'll be leaving in 47 hours. Joe laughed. "Good one, Ben, I know it's you." His friend Ben was always pulling pranks. This had to be his most elaborate yet. "This is not a joke, Mr. Miller. The United Nations Space Committee, in partnership with NASA, has selected you as humanity's representative. A transport vessel will arrive to collect you on Thursday morning. Pack for a 3-month journey." Joe sat down hard on his kitchen chair. "But why me? I'm just a marine biologist. I study coral." Director Bell sighed. "To be frank, Mr. Miller, there's been a mistake. We were supposed to send Harold Winters, our chief diplomatic officer, but your name was somehow submitted instead, and the Concorde has already approved you specifically. These aliens are very strict about their protocols. Changing the delegate now would be seen as a serious insult that could damage Earth's chances of joining the Galactic Concorde." Joe ran his hand through his messy brown hair. "This can't be real. I assure you it is very real. A car will pick you up tomorrow at noon for briefing. Try to prepare yourself, Mr. Miller. The fate of Earth's relationship with the galaxy now rests in your hands." The line went dead. Joe stared at his phone, then at Bubbles swimming lazily in his bowl. "Buddy, I think I'm going to need a stronger coffee." The next day, Joe found himself in a secret underground facility beneath the NASA complex. People in suits rushed around looking stressed. A tall woman with gray hair approached him. "Mr. Miller, I'm Dr. Linda Patel, your briefing officer. We don't have much time." For the next 10 hours, they tried to cram Joe's head with information about the Galactic Concorde, alien cultures, diplomatic protocols, and the importance of this mission. Earth, it turned out, was classified as a Class 12 death world due to its extreme weather, dangerous animals, and the humans' surprising ability to survive in harsh conditions. Most Concorde species evolved on much more gentle planets, Dr. Patel explained. "They find us fascinating but frightening. You need to show them we're civilized." Joe tried his best to absorb everything, but his mind kept wandering. This had to be an extremely detailed prank, or maybe he'd fallen and hit his head. Maybe he was in a coma dreaming all this up. "Mr. Miller, are you listening? This is important." Dr. Patel snapped her fingers in front of his face. "Sorry," Joe said. "It's just, this is crazy. Yesterday I was worried about coral bleaching rates, and today you're telling me I'm going to meet aliens." "I know this is overwhelming," she said more gently, "but you're all we've got. The ship arrives tomorrow." That night, Joe returned to his apartment to pack. He stared at his open suitcase, completely lost. What does one pack for a galactic diplomatic mission? His work clothes were mostly shorts, t-shirts, and the occasional button-up for meetings. He didn't even own a suit. "Screw it," he muttered, throwing in his most comfortable clothes, including his favorite Hawaiian shirt with little seahorses printed on it. He added his lucky flip-flops, the ones he'd worn when he discovered a new species of coral 2 years ago. As he was about to close his freezer, he spotted a corn dog he'd been saving for a special occasion. On impulse, he grabbed it and tossed it into his bag. If this was a dream or a prank, what did it matter? And if it was real, well, he'd want a taste of home. The next morning, Joe stood in an empty field outside of town, surrounded by stern-faced government agents. The air began to shimmer and a sound like humming electricity filled the space. Then right before his eyes, a sleek silver ship appeared. It was shaped like a teardrop and glowed faintly blue around the edges. A ramp extended from its side, touching the ground with a soft hiss. Joe's heart pounded in his chest. This was no prank. A tall, thin figure appeared at the top of the ramp. It had 4 arms, bluish skin, and a head that looked somewhat like an octopus. It wore an elaborate uniform covered in what Joe guessed were medals, or symbols of rank. "Welcome, delegate of Earth," the alien said in a surprisingly clear voice. "I am First Commander Zixtal of the diplomatic vessel Celestial Envoy. We are honored to transport you to the Centennial Gathering." One of the agents nudged Joe forward. On shaky legs, he approached the ramp. Hi there," Joe said, waving awkwardly. "I'm Joe Miller, from Florida." The alien's large eyes blinked slowly. "Florida? Is this your territory designation?" "Kind of, yeah. It's where I live." Joe adjusted his backpack nervously. He was wearing cargo shorts, a t-shirt with a faded surf shop logo, and his lucky flip-flops. Next to the elegant alien, he felt ridiculously underdressed. Zixtal made a gesture. That might have been confusion. "Very well, Joe Miller from Florida, please board. We depart immediately." Joe looked back at the group of agents. Dr. Patel gave him a tight smile and a thumbs up. He took a deep breath and walked up the ramp. The inside of the ship was even more amazing than the outside. Glowing panels lined curved walls and strange symbols floated in the air. Several other aliens, all different shapes and sizes, stared at him with various appendages. "This is the human," Zixtal announced. "Our journey to Harmonious Prime begins now." As the ship hummed to life, Joe felt an odd sense of calm settle over him. If this was real, and it certainly seemed to be, then he was about to become the first human to travel beyond our solar system. He was going to represent Earth to an entire galaxy of intelligent beings, and he was going to do it in flip-flops, with a frozen corn dog in his bag. "Well," Joe muttered to himself as the ship rose into the sky. "At least it's not a boring Tuesday anymore." The first few hours aboard the Celestial Envoy were awkward. Joe sat in what he guessed was a guest quarters, though the chair seemed designed for someone with a different body shape. The walls glowed with a soft blue light, and strange symbols floated in the air. Joe pulled out his phone, hoping to take some pictures, but it showed no signal. Of course it wouldn't work in space. A panel in the wall slid open and a small alien entered. This one had green skin and large round eyes that took up most of its face. It wore a simple uniform with many pockets. "Human delegate, I am medical. Officer Ping. I must check your vitals to ensure you are adapting to our ship environment," the alien said in a high-pitched voice. "Oh, sure thing," Joe replied, still not quite believing this was real. Ping waved a glowing device over Joe's body. The device made soft beeping noises. The alien's large eyes widened even further. "Your internal temperature is 98.6 degrees. You are burning up," Ping exclaimed. Joe laughed. "That's normal for humans, we run hot." Ping made a whistling sound. "Death-worlders indeed. Your species functions at temperatures that would cook most Concorde races." The alien made notes on a floating screen. "And your body contains iron-based blood?" "Yep, that's us. Iron pumping through our veins," Joe said. "Fascinating. Most civilized species use copper or silicon compounds. Iron is quite primitive, but efficient for your planet's conditions, I suppose." Joe wasn't sure if he had just been insulted. "So how long until we reach this Harmonious Prime place?" 3 of your Earth weeks," Ping replied. "First Commander Zixtal requests your presence in the command center. I will guide you." Joe followed the small alien through curved hallways. The floor hummed beneath his flip-flops, which made soft slapping sounds with each step. Crew members stopped to stare as he passed. Some backed away slightly. The command center was a large dome-shaped room with screens showing stars and planets. Zixtal stood in the center, tentacles moving gracefully over control panels. Ah, Human Joe. Thank you for joining us, Zixtal said. We wish to discuss your requirements. Requirements? Joe asked. Food, atmosphere, gravity. Our ship can adjust to various species' needs, but we have never transported a death worlder before. Joe shrugged. I eat pretty much anything, though I did bring a corn dog for emergencies. Corn dog? Zixtal looked confused. You consume canine companions, made of plant material? No, Joe laughed. It's just a name. It's a hot dog on a stick covered in cornbread batter and fried. The aliens looked even more confused. And hot dog is? Ping asked cautiously. It's not an actual dog, Joe explained. It's just meat in a tube shape. Meat, Zixtal said slowly. You consume animal flesh? Joe suddenly realized he might have stepped into a cultural issue. Yes? Don't you guys eat meat? The command center went silent. One of the crew members made a gagging sound. Most Concord species evolved past consuming other life forms many millennia ago, Zixtal explained carefully. We synthesize our nutrients from base elements. Oh, Joe said, feeling awkward. Well, I can eat vegetables too, I'm not picky. Zixtal seemed to relax slightly. We will program our food synthesizers for human-compatible nutrients. As for your other needs, our scans indicate you require oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere and approximately 1 Earth gravity. That sounds perfect, Joe said. Then he had a thought. Wait, what do you breathe? Methane, Zixtal replied. But do not worry. Our ship accommodates multiple atmospheric needs. Your quarters and common areas you access will contain your required gases. Joe suddenly felt very far from home. He was on a ship filled with aliens who breathed different air, ate different food, and were clearly nervous around him. What had he gotten himself into? Over the next few days, Joe tried to learn more about the Galactic Concord. The ship had a database he could access, though the translation was sometimes confusing. He learned that the Concord included over 300 different intelligent species, with the oldest members having been spacefaring for nearly 50,000 years. Earth, with its high gravity, extreme weather, and aggressive life forms, was considered unusually dangerous. Humans were viewed as remarkably tough for surviving such conditions. This explained why the crew seemed both fascinated and frightened by him. One morning, though in space day and night were artificial, Joe noticed something wrong with the plants in the ship's common area. The leaves were turning yellow, and some were wilting. A tall, spindly alien was examining them with concern. This one had purplish skin and 6 limbs. Excuse me, Joe said. I couldn't help noticing the plants. They look sick. The alien turned in surprise. Yes. Our hydroponics system is experiencing issues. I am botanist Ven. Joe stepped closer to look at the plants. These look like they have a nutrient deficiency, probably nitrogen or magnesium, based on the yellowing pattern. Ven tilted her head. You know plant systems? I'm a marine biologist. I study ocean life on Earth, including a lot of plant-like organisms. The principles are pretty similar. For the next hour, Joe helped Ven analyze the hydroponics system. His knowledge of coral reef ecosystems turned out to be surprisingly relevant. They discovered a filter that needed replacement, which was throwing off the nutrient balance. Thank you, Human Joe, Ven said when they finished. The plants will recover now. No problem, and just Joe is fine, he replied with a smile. Word of Joe's help spread quickly through the ship. The next day, a crew member approached him about a problem with the water recycling system. The day after that, Joe found himself explaining Earth's ocean currents to a fascinated group of alien scientists. By the end of the first week, Joe was no longer met with fear in the hallways. The crew had started to see him not as a scary death worlder, but as a helpful colleague with unique knowledge. One evening, Joe was sitting in the observation deck, watching stars streak by, when Zixtal joined him. You have surprised us, human. Joe, the commander said. How so? Joe asked. When we learned we would transport an Earth delegate, we prepared for many scenarios. We expected a military figure, heavily armed and suspicious. We added extra security measures. We prepared for potential aggression. Joe laughed. Sorry to disappoint. On the contrary, Zixtal said. You have shown us that Deathworlder does not mean dangerous. Different does not mean threatening. This is educational for us. Joe thought about this as he looked out at the stars. Back on Earth we have a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Book. Cover? Zixtal seemed confused again. It means appearances can be deceiving. Just because something looks scary doesn't mean it is. A wise philosophy from a supposedly primitive world, Zixtal noted. Perhaps this is why your species survived your harsh planet. Adaptability. Openness to the unknown. Joe shrugged. Or maybe we're just too stubborn to die. For the first time, Zixtal made a sound that might have been laughter. 2 more weeks. Until Harmonious Prime. Human Joe. I believe the Centennial Gathering will be more interesting with you present. Joe looked down at his flip-flops, then back at the stars. I hope that's a good thing. The day of arrival at Harmonious Prime came faster than Joe expected. He stood in his quarters trying to decide what to wear for his first appearance at the Centennial Gathering. The crew had offered to make him formal attire, but nothing they designed seemed right. The fabrics felt strange against his skin, and the styles were made for bodies with different numbers of limbs. In the end, Joe decided to just be himself. He put on his cleanest pair of cargo shorts, his Hawaiian shirt with the little seahorses, and his lucky flip-flops. From his bag, he pulled out the corn dog, which had stayed frozen in the special storage unit in his room. Today seemed like the right day for his emergency earth snack. A soft chime sounded, indicating someone at his door. Come in, Joe called. Ping entered, holding what looked like a small metal badge. Human Joe, we are approaching Harmonious Prime. This translator will help you understand the many languages you will encounter. Joe took the badge and pinned it to his shirt. Thanks, Ping. How do I look? Ready to represent Earth? Ping blinked several times. You are wearing this to the Centennial Gathering? Yeah, why not? Joe shrugged. These are my lucky flip-flops, and this shirt has never let me down. Ping made a whistling sound that Joe had come to recognize as the alien version of a sigh. The gathering is the most formal diplomatic event in the galaxy. Most delegates wear their species' highest ceremonial attire. Joe looked down at his outfit, then back at Ping. Well, this is what I've got. Besides, I think it's better to be honest about who we are, right? Earth is a pretty casual place compared to what you've told me about the Conquered. Honesty is valued, Ping admitted. But so is protocol. Just be prepared for strong reactions. Joe nodded, tucking his corn dog into his pocket for later. I'll do my best. When the Celestial Envoy docked at Harmonious Prime's orbital station, Joe got his first view of the gathering place of the Galactic Concord. Through the viewport, he saw a massive structure floating in space. It looked like a giant snowflake made of crystal and light, with hundreds of ships of different shapes and sizes docked around it. Wow, Joe whispered. The Great Hall of Union, Zixtal explained, coming to stand beside him. Built 10,000 years ago as a neutral meeting ground for all Concord species. A shuttle took them from the envoy to the station. As they approached, Joe noticed that even the shuttle bay was impressive, with high ceilings and shimmering walls that seemed to change color as they walked past. The welcoming ceremony will begin shortly, Zixtal said. You will be announced as Earth's delegate, and then you will walk to the center of the hall and bow to the High Chancellor. Joe nodded, trying to remember everything he had been told. Bow to the Chancellor, got it? What does the Chancellor look like? You cannot miss High Chancellor Vroon. She is from the Lipax species, 3 times your height, with golden scales, and 4 sets of wings. Joe swallowed hard. Right, the big one with wings. Got it. The doors to the Great Hall opened, and Joe's jaw dropped. The room was enormous, with a ceiling so high he could barely see it. Thousands of aliens, of every imaginable shape, size, and color filled the space. Some floated in the air, others moved on many legs, and some seemed to flow like liquid across the floor. A loud booming voice announced, Delegate of Earth Class 12 Death World, every eye, sensory organ, and detection apparatus in the room turned toward Joe. A path cleared through the crowd, leading to a raised platform where the largest alien Joe had ever seen sat on an ornate throne. High Chancellor Vroon was exactly as Zixtal had described, massive, golden-scaled, with 4 sets of wings that shimmered with iridescent colors. Joe took a deep breath and began walking. His flip-flops made a distinct slapping sound against the polished floor. The sound echoed in the suddenly silent hall. With each step he heard whispers and murmurs from the gathered delegates. Is that what Deathworlders wear? So small for such a dangerous species? What is that slapping noise? Is that a weapon on its feet? Joe kept his eyes forward, trying to look confident. When he reached the center of the hall, he stopped and gave a deep bow to the High Chancellor, just as he had been instructed. Welcome, Delegate of Earth. High Chancellor Vroon's voice was surprisingly melodic for her size. The Galactic Concord greets you and your world. Thank you, High Chancellor, Joe replied, straightening up. Earth is honored to be invited to the Centennial Gathering. Vroon's large eyes blinked slowly as she studied Joe. Your appearance is unexpected, Earth Delegate. We were told humans are formidable warriors from a harsh world. Joe smiled. Some of us are warriors, yes. But most of us are just regular people trying to live our lives. I'm a marine biologist. I study ocean life. A murmur ran through the crowd again. One delegate, a tall, heavily armored being with sharp ridges along its body, stepped forward. This is an insult, the alien declared. The Krell Empire expected a worthy representative from this supposed death world. Instead, they send this beachgoer? Joe recognized the Krell from the ship's database. They were a militaristic species known for their aggressive expansion before joining the Concord. No insult intended, Joe said calmly. On Earth, we don't judge people by how scary they look or how fancy their clothes are. We judge them by their actions and their character. The Krell delegate made a harsh barking sound. Character? A true Deathworlder would show proper respect through strength and formality. Before things could escalate further, High Chancellor Vroon raised one of her massive clawed hands. Enough, Delegate Krell. The Earth representative has arrived as invited. The purpose of the Centennial Gathering is to learn about new cultures, not to judge them by our standards. The Krell delegate stepped back, though Joe could tell it was still angry. The High Chancellor turned back to Joe. Earth delegate, you will be assigned quarters and an attaché who will guide you through the protocols of the gathering. The formal dinner begins in 3 cycles. Joe nodded. Thank you, High Chancellor. As he was led away by a small, multi-armed alien introduced as Nimra, his new attaché, Joe could hear the buzz of conversation behind him. He had certainly made an impression, though maybe not the one Earth's leaders had hoped for. Nimra showed Joe to his quarters, which were surprisingly comfortable despite being designed for multiple species. The attaché looked at Joe with 4 of its 6 eyes, the other 2 busy scanning a floating data screen. Earth delegate, I must prepare you for the formal dinner. There are 217 greeting protocols you must learn, 43 dining rituals, and the proper responses to at least 30 potential conversation topics. Joe sat on the edge of what seemed to be a bed. Can you give me the short version, the really important stuff? Nimra's eyes all blinked at different times, creating a ripple effect across its face. The short version? This is not a casual Fant Earth delegate. This is the Centennial Gathering. Joe sighed. Look, I get that this is important. But I'm just one guy who found out about all this 3 weeks ago. Maybe instead of trying to make me perfect at your customs, you could help me explain Earth customs to everyone else? Nimra paused, considering this. An interesting approach. Perhaps this is why you were chosen, to provide a genuine glimpse of Earth culture? Joe laughed. I wouldn't go that far. I'm pretty sure I'm here by mistake. But since I am here, I might as well be real. He pulled the corn dog from his pocket. Starting with this. Want to try a bite of authentic Earth cuisine? The formal dinner was held in a massive hall with a ceiling that showed the stars outside. Thousands of delegates sat at tables arranged in a spiral pattern. Each table was designed to accommodate the different body types and atmospheric needs of its occupants. Some tables were surrounded by special bubbles of gas, others were partially submerged in liquids, and a few floated in midair. Joe was led to a table near the center by Nimra. His table companions included representatives from 6 different species, all new to him. Joe's seat was beside a small, furry being with large ears, and next to a tall, thin alien that seemed to be made of living crystal. Earth delegate. These are representatives from the Middle Rim worlds, Nimra explained. To your left is delegate Leary of the Minaru. To your right is delegate Christ of the Luminari. Nice to meet you all, Joe said with a smile. I'm Joe from Earth. The crystal being, Christ, made a tinkling sound like wind chimes. Earth, the death world. We have heard much about your arrival. The furry alien, Leary, twitched her large ears. Is it true you walked into the Great Hall wearing primitive foot coverings and making loud noises? Joe laughed. You mean my flip-flops? Yeah, that's true. They're comfortable. He lifted his foot to show them. The delegates leaned away slightly. On my world, these are casual beach wear. Nothing fancy, but practical. Before they could respond, a loud tone echoed through the hall. All conversation stopped as High Chancellor Vroon rose from her seat at the central table. Delegates of the Conquered, we begin the centennial feast with the ritual of cleansing. Servers appeared carrying small bowls of clear liquid to each table. Nimra whispered to Joe, "Dip your fingers in the bowl and then touch them to your forehead. It symbolizes clear thoughts." Joe watched as the others at his table performed the ritual, then did the same. The liquid felt cool and had a slight tingling sensation. Next came the ritual of silence, where everyone at the table was supposed to remain quiet for 1 full minute to honor past members of the Conquered. As the silence began, Joe tried to sit still and be respectful. But halfway through, he noticed something strange happening at a nearby table. A small gelatinous alien was changing colors rapidly, from blue to red to purple. None of the other delegates seemed to notice, but Joe recognized the pattern from his study of Earth sea creatures. It looked like a distress signal. Joe stood up, breaking the sacred silence. "Excuse me," he called out, pointing to the gelatinous alien. "I think that delegate needs help." The hall erupted in shocked whispers at the breach of protocol. Nimra tugged desperately at Joe's shirt. "Earth delegate, you have broken the ritual of silence. This is a serious offense, but that alien is in trouble," Joe insisted. "Look at the color patterns. It's a distress signal, like what sea creatures on Earth use when they're in danger." Medical officers rushed to the table Joe had pointed to. The gelatinous alien had now turned completely red and was beginning to lose its shape. "The Earth delegate is correct," one of the medical officers announced. "Delegate Blob is experiencing toxic shock from an incompatible food item." Another moment and they would have dissolved completely. The hall went silent again, but this time with surprise rather than ritual. The medical team rushed Delegate Blob away for treatment. High Chancellor Vroon's voice boomed through the hall. "It seems we owe the Earth delegate our thanks. His unconventional awareness has saved a life today." Joe sat back down, feeling awkward about the attention but glad he had noticed the problem. The delegates at his table looked at him with new interest. "How did you know?" Christ asked, crystal body glimmering with curiosity. "On Earth, I study ocean life. Many sea creatures use color changes to communicate, especially when they're in danger. I just recognized the pattern." Leary's ears twitched, faster. "You study life forms on your dangerous world? For what purpose?" "To understand them better, to learn how they adapt and survive, and to protect them when needed," Joe explained. The rest of the dinner proceeded more smoothly. The food, served to Joe, was a bland but edible approximation of Earth cuisine. Throughout the meal, delegates from other tables found excuses to walk past and get a look at the human who had broken protocol to save a life. After dinner, Joe was approached by a group of delegates who introduced themselves as the Science Council. "Earth, delegate, we are impressed by your observational skills," said the lead scientist, a tall being with multiple eye stalks. "We would like to invite you to tour our research facilities tomorrow." "I'd like that," Joe replied. "And please, call me Joe." As the gathering broke up for the night, Joe noticed the Krell delegate watching him from across the room. The armored alien still looked unhappy, but there was something new in its gaze. Perhaps a hint of grudging respect. Back in his quarters, Joe kicked off his flip-flops and flopped onto the bed. Nimra hovered nearby, busy updating a schedule on a floating screen. You have 17 appointments tomorrow, Earth Delegate. The Science Council, the Cultural Exchange Committee, the Defense Analysis Group. Whoa, slow down, Joe interrupted. Why does everyone want to meet me all of a sudden? Nimra's eyes blinked in sequence again. You have become interesting to them. A death worlder who notices details others miss, who breaks protocol to save a life, who wears strange clothing without concern for appearance. Joe laughed. So I'm a novelty act. More than that, Nimra said seriously. Many delegates are re-evaluating their assumptions about Earth. They expected warriors or politicians. Instead, they got a scientist who watches and helps. Joe thought about this. He had come to the gathering with no plan, no strategy, just his own personality and skills. Somehow that seemed to be working better than any diplomatic training might have. Well, I'll try not to disappoint them tomorrow, he said. But tomorrow would bring challenges no one could have predicted. Because while Joe slept, sensors on the far side of Harmonious Prime were detecting unusual activity from the system's star. Activity that the Concord scientists would soon recognize as the early signs of a devastating solar event. An event that would test not just Joe, but the entire galactic Concord, and reveal whether a human from a death world could truly make a difference in the face of cosmic disaster. Joe was in the middle of a tour of the Science Council's research facility when the alarms began. Strange, wailing sounds echoed through the corridors of Harmonious Prime. The scientists around him suddenly stopped talking, their various appendages and sensory organs showing signs of distress. What's happening? Joe asked. The lead scientist, whose name was Vril, turned all 12 eye stalks toward a display screen on the wall. The screen showed a large orange ball that Joe recognized as the local star. Around the star, red symbols flashed urgently. The star, Vril said, voice dropping to a worried tone. It is experiencing unexpected activity. A solar flare is forming, much larger than any in our records. Other scientists gathered around the screen, chattering in various languages. Joe's translator badge struggled to keep up with the technical terms, but he got the general idea. The star was about to release a massive burst of energy aimed directly at Harmonious Prime. How bad will it be? Joe asked. Vril's eye stalks drooped. If our readings are correct, the flare will overwhelm our standard shield systems. There will be significant damage to the station. Before Joe could ask more questions, an announcement echoed through the facility. All delegates report to the Great Hall immediately. This is an emergency protocol. The Great Hall was chaos when Joe arrived. Delegates from all species moved about in panic, some floating in the air, others huddled, in groups. High Chancellor Vroon stood on the central platform, trying to maintain order. Joe pushed his way through the crowd until he reached Nimra, who was frantically working with a data screen. What can I do to help? Joe asked. Nimra looked up in surprise. Earth Delegate, you should be preparing for evacuation like the others. Evacuation? Is it that serious? Nimra's 6 eyes all focused on Joe. The solar flare will hit Harmonious Prime in 36 hours. Our shields can only withstand 60% of the projected energy. Damage will be severe. On the central platform, High Chancellor Vroon finally managed to quiet the crowd. Delegates of the Concord, we face a serious situation. Our scientists confirm that a major solar event will impact Harmonious Prime. We must begin evacuation. Procedures immediately. A loud voice cut through the hall. Who will be evacuated first? It was the Krell delegate, armored body gleaming under the lights. There are not enough ships to evacuate everyone at once. This set off another wave of nervous chatter. Joe listened as different delegates began to argue. Some suggested evacuating the oldest species first, as they were founding members of the Concord. Others argued for prioritizing those whose physical forms were most vulnerable to radiation. The Krell insisted military powers should leave first to maintain order elsewhere. Joe watched as the debate became more heated. He looked around at the worried faces and forms of the gathered species. Then he looked down at his flip-flops, thinking hard. With a deep breath, Joe stepped forward and walked toward the central platform. The sound of his flip-flops slapping against the floor somehow cut through the noise. When he reached the platform, he cleared his throat. "Excuse me, High Chancellor, may I speak?" Chancellor Vroon looked down at the small human with surprise. "Earth Delegate, this is an emergency council. You have no standing yet in the Conquered." "I know," Joe said. "But on Earth we deal with disasters all the time. Hurricanes, earthquakes, floods. Maybe I can help." The Chancellor hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. The Conquered values all wisdom in times of crisis." Joe turned to face the crowd. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "Where I come from in Florida, we get big storms called hurricanes every year. When they hit, we don't argue about who gets to evacuate first based on who's most important. We have a system based on who needs help the most." The hall went quiet as the delegates listened. The old, the young, the sick, they go first. Those who can help others go last. And everyone in between is organized by need, not status. The Krell delegate stepped forward. "And why should we follow the evacuation plans of a primitive world?" Joe met the Krell's gaze. "Because we survive. Every time. And we do it by working. Together. Not by fighting over who matters more." High Chancellor Vroon's wings shifted thoughtfully. "What do you propose, Earth Delegate?" Joe looked around the room, then pointed to Nimra. "Can I see a map of the station and a list of available ships?" For the next hour, Joe worked with Nimra and several scientists to develop an evacuation plan. He drew on his knowledge of hurricane evacuations from Florida, adapting it to the much larger scale of Harmonious Prime. They grouped delegates by physical vulnerability to the solar radiation, created clear evacuation routes to avoid bottlenecks, and assigned helpers to assist those who needed it. Joe stood before the council again, explaining the plan step by step. The most radiation-sensitive species leave first, regardless of political status. The most radiation-resistant can stay longest and help with the evacuation. We use all available ships, not just the fancy ones, and most importantly, everyone helps everyone else. To Joe's surprise, even the Krell delegate nodded in agreement. The Deathworlders' plan has logic. In battle, we too evacuate the wounded. First, it is honorable. With the plan approved, Harmonious Prime burst into organized activity. Joe found himself working alongside aliens of all kinds. He helped small, floating delegates into escape pods. He carried delicate crystal beings to their ships. He even worked with the Krell to move heavy equipment protecting vital systems. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Joe lost track of time, focusing only on the task at hand. His lucky flip-flops slapped against the floors as he ran from one section to another, helping wherever he could. 20 hours into the evacuation, Joe took a short break in a viewing area. Through the massive windows, he could see the star in the distance, now visibly disturbed, with huge loops of energy arcing from its surface. Zixtal, the ship commander who had first brought Joe to Harmonious Prime, found him there. "Earth Delegate," Zixtal said, "your shuttle is ready. Most of the vulnerable delegates have been evacuated. It is time for you to leave as well." Joe looked out at the ships still arriving and departing. "Are there still people who need help?" "Yes, but they are mostly conquered officials and hardy species who can withstand the initial radiation." Joe shook his head. "Then I'm staying to help. Earth is a death world, remember? We're pretty tough." Zixtal's tentacles moved in what Joe had learned was a gesture of respect. "I expected nothing less from you. Your actions have changed many minds about Earth and its people." As the evacuation continued, word spread through the remaining delegates about the human in flip-flops who refused to leave while others needed help. Some began calling it pulling a Joe, when someone put the needs of others before their own status or safety. And when the solar flare finally hit, 36 hours after the alarm first sounded, Harmonious Prime still stood. Damaged, but not destroyed. and every single delegate, from the oldest conquered founder to the newest observer species, had been safely evacuated. All thanks to a marine biologist from Florida, his lucky flip-flops, and the practical wisdom of a species that had learned to survive on a world that tried to kill them every day.